It's so difficult to and so exhausting to hear the same thing over and over again, and it's just actually heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I think that like this is a sport that we love so much, and we want to just enjoy it just like everyone else. And the fact that we can't go to Grand Prix without judgment or without being subject to any kind of harassment is it's just exhausting.
Like,
Like
why is there not a code of conduct for everybody who enters a space, a trackside space? What behavior do they expect of their fans? And I think just saying we don't condone racism is not enough. We don't condone homophobia, we don't condone sexism, but obviously you do, because otherwise you would ensure that it doesn't happen. Because this weekend it was just like track limits, track limits, track limits, track limits. That was the thing. So yeah, just dishing them out. um Hello, everybody. Welcome back to On the Chicane. You're here with me, Paris, and my co host, Mariam. And today we are talking about the Austrian Grand Prix in Spielberg, Austria. It was a pretty intense weekend. There was a lot going on. You had the Orange Army out in full force. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And you also had a sprint race weekend. So the weekend was a little bit more jumbled up than usual, with qualifying being on a Friday and then the sprint race being on a Saturday, and then the main race being on a Sunday. So there was lots of opportunity to grab lots of points and lots of opportunity for racing. I'm still a bit skeptical on how well that succeeds on the sprint race weekend, but I'd love to know your thoughts. Um, Other than that, like, I think generally it was a pretty decent weekend, but it was definitely the tone of it was brought down by a lot of the events that actually happened around the race. So if you don't know, during the race weekend, lots of reports of racism, homophobia, sexism, and just general like horrible bigotry was called out a lot on social media by a lot of the fans that were attending, specifically women, because there was a lot of misogynistic behavior directed at women, but also a lot of horrible things directed at some of the fans who were supporting Mercedes and Lewis. And again, like some of the fans who might be visibly presenting as, homosexual or other, non-specific genders. So I think there was a lot happening, and we've seen it at some of the previous Grand Prix. I think from a personal point of view, it's time that F1 does a lot more to tackle the issue. What do you think, Mariam?
I think I'm tired.
Yeah.
I'm so tired of the same old shit, frankly. Um, it's just horrible that this happened this weekend. It's not surprising to me at all that it was white fans who seem to support one particular driver.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. Honestly, it's exhausting as a woman, as a person of color, as someone who, is an ally in many ways, because, we both face discrimination in everyday life. It's so difficult to and so exhausting to hear the same thing over and over again, and it's just actually heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I think that like this is a sport that we love so much, and we want to just enjoy it just like everyone else. And the fact that we can't go to Grand Prix without judgment or without being subject to any kind of harassment is it's just exhausting. Like this actually reminded me of something that I completely buried, to be honest, and it was only brought to the forefront this weekend after all the reports came out. Um, I actually experienced, I think if you've been following us on Twitter for a while, you will remember my tweets that actually made the rounds last year, um, about me being sexually harassed by some old white man who was taking photos of me without my consent. Um, and it's just, I can't express enough just how tired I am of the same old shit. It's so difficult to be a woman in this sport. And no matter how much the FIA and F1 talk about progress and want to promote diversity and inclusion, and no matter how much people are doing like behind the scenes, they really need to address this kind of thing at the events.
Yeah.
You know, there need to maybe be officers who are in place particularly for this kind of thing. People that you can go to. For example, when I was dealing with what had happened to me, I was looking around and I couldn't see anyone that I could like easily go to. And I actually had a group of like just young 20-year-olds who came to my aid. But that's another thing, like people don't speak up.
No.
Like again, when this happened to me last year, I remember, and I don't know if this girl's watching our videos, I don't know if she's going to see this, but if she remembers replying to my tweets, she saw everything that happened to me. She was sat there with her dad, and it actually really annoyed me because she replied saying, "Oh my God, my dad and I were sat like near you and we saw this guy taking the photos and we thought it was absolutely disgusting." And in my head, I was thinking, all right, I don't expect you to maybe do much if you're like quite young or whatever, but your dad was sat there with you. You're a young girl. If your dad was sat there and he thought this is wrong, why is this man taking photos of this girl? Why didn't he say something? Why didn't he come to my defense? It just really annoyed me. So I think when you see this kind of thing, call it out for what it is, because it just needs to stop.
Literally. Like nobody should have to go to a Formula One race in a group. Like you shouldn't have to go in a group of people, because your fear is that if you don't go in a group of people, you're going to be subject to harassment. Like you were sitting in a stand by yourself. I was in a different stand at that particular time. So had we been together, it might have been an entirely different story. But because you were by yourself, people felt like, okay, well, she's vulnerable. We can take advantage of her, or I can take advantage of her. And I think that's what the issue is like people are so horrible that they feel like anybody who, you know, they deem they can harass, they just do it. And I think that's what's disgusting. It's like there's an entitlement to it as well. Like that man felt like he was entitled to your picture, he was entitled to your space. And people make other people feel so uncomfortable in those situations. And like you said, I don't feel like the governing body of our sport, of the sport that we love, does enough to tackle it on the ground. Like, yes, you might be, you know, saying things in closed doors. The F1 media team were very quick to put out a statement. They put out a statement, I think, on Saturday morning, if not on Friday. So they were very quick once it was making the rounds on Twitter to put out a statement. But all it said was like, we condemn any harassment. We can, you know, the usual insert PR line here, right? Like it wasn't something that said, okay, this is what you should be doing in that situation. These are the consequences for people who act in that way. This is how you can get help if you are in a situation where you feel vulnerable or scared. There is a lot more that they can be doing to tackle these issues, and they don't do it. And time again, we all have to call them out, which we shouldn't have to. I'm glad we do. I'm glad that now, you know, we have social media, we can almost communicate our frustrations directly to them. Okay, it's for a medium and it's not like to their faces, but they can see our frustration, they can see everything building up on social media, and they know that they have to act. But the fact of the matter is they are not acting quick enough, and they are not putting actions in place and systems in place. Like, why is there not a code of conduct for everybody who enters a space, a trackside space? What behavior do they expect of their fans? And I think just saying we don't condone racism is not enough. We don't condone homophobia, we don't condone sexism, but obviously you do, because otherwise you would ensure that it doesn't happen. Otherwise there would be, you know, massive procedural things that happen when somebody flouts those rules. And there's lots of evidence of it, you know, on social media. People have videos and all this kind of stuff. So, you know, it's not as if to say it's just happening in a back hall. And people shouldn't have to have videos. Like, people should be able to go up to somebody and say, look, that person over there has just done this, and they should be questioned, they should be removed, and they should like be put through the ringer. I'm sick and tired of having these conversations where it's just like people get away with everything. And quite frankly, it's a specific demographic of people who get away with everything, because at the end of the day, you know, the most common denominator in all of that is it's going to be a white man it's going to be a white boy, it's going to be a white middle-aged man. So what we need is more of the white middle-aged men and boys to call out the behavior of other white middle-aged men and boys. They're not going to listen to us. So if you are a white man and you're watching this video, like, do your part. Tell your guys, stop doing this. This is not cool. You know, racism is not cool. Sexism is not cool. Homophobia is not cool. Nobody should have to walk through any F1 space and feel away.
I'm actually getting really emotional just thinking about all of, like, it's just exhausting.
Yeah.
And I'm just, you're right, there needs to be things put into place, like
signage on the ground. Definitely, there's a lot that can be done, and there's a lot, you know, a lot of people have said this weekend. Do you want to take a break for a second?
Right.
But yeah, so that's kind of what we wanted to say on that matter. And I think, you know, we've had to say a lot in the last few weeks about all of these topics. We've been very vocal about it on our social media, and we know it's not getting put to bed anytime soon, and it's going to be a battle that we have to fight. And I just hope that all of you are like fighting with us, and, you know, everybody is in it together. So yeah, let's just keep pushing back, because the more noise we make, then hopefully eventually they'll do something about it, and none of us have to feel this way.
I think, like, yeah, it's a really negative thing that we're talking about, but just to shed some positivity on, like, the situation in a way. Like, don't forget that social media is a place that you can come to. So, for example, Clique this weekend, in response to what was going on, they put out a little group chat thing, so that if you were there at a race, or it was just like you and one other person, there were people that you could connect with, and people who are willing to, you know, help other. I'm not going to stop saying people. I'm going to say women who are willing to help other women, because I don't. Yeah. So just, despite all of this that's happening, and if you do attend a race and you find yourself in this kind of situation, remember that you do have social media. So always just kind of put out a hashtag or whatever, and see if you can connect with someone, or just go and find another woman. Like, when I don't want to keep making it about me, but like, when this happened to me, that group that came and saved me, they were just a young group of 20-year-olds, but the fact that they were there and they came to me, like, they noticed what was happening and they spoke to me, was such a massive relief. So if you're feeling like you're a little bit uncomfortable, something's going on, or you've been subject to something, if you can't find anyone official, or, you know, you can't see anyone that you can actually go to, just go find a group of people. For the most part, if they're women, they'll be willing to help you. So it's just about looking out for each other, guys.
Definitely. And if the Orange Army need to be sanctioned, and Zandvoort needs to be like pulled off the books because people don't feel safe, Belgium as well, wouldn't be too sad to see it go, I'll tell you that.
I mean, I would. Spa's a great track, but you do need to have some action for these situations that keep arising. So yeah, I think just remember that despite all of this, like, there are people that you can go to. And I think that's it on that subject for now, because we could probably talk about this forever.
Pretty good. On to race weekend, I guess. Yeah. So as I said, on Friday it was qualifying, because it was a sprint race weekend. It was a bit of a crazy qualifying. So Mercedes had, you know, we're testing out a new, I think it was new aero or new floors or something, and I don't know what happened, but both Mercedes ended up whipping out and crashing out. So I was like, damn, weekend is over. Like, what is going to happen? Because they were pretty bad crashes, and then the Merc team had to work nearly like all night to repair it in time for the sprint quali the next day. But I think it was just kind of crazy that both Mercs had an issue. Still don't exactly know what happened. Like, there was talks of wind, there was talks of the rear not being set up properly, and things like snapping out of place and being too difficult to steer around the corner. Who knows what the actual issue was, but yeah, I was a bit heartbroken. I was like, shit, that's our weekend done. Because they didn't make it into Q3.
Yeah.
Or they did make it into Q3, but it was at the very beginning of Q3. So neither of them finished Q3.
Yeah, it was weird to see both cars, and like I think one of the commentators, I'm not gonna say who because I don't remember, but someone was like, you don't expect Hamilton to be doing this kind of thing when he's been in the sport for like 15 years.
It's very rare.
And it's a really good point. You were like, I was like, yeah, to be fair. But then, just as Paris has said, it's such a rare incident. Like Hamilton very rarely screws up like that. So it obviously must have been something to do with, I don't know, steering or the wind, as they were saying. I don't know. But it was weird to see Hamilton make a mistake like that, and for Russell to also just not finish quali. It was just a bit like, what is going on?
Yeah.
So honestly, massive kudos to the Mercedes team, because they do work to curfews. Like you're not allowed to work on the car past a certain time. So they must have really, really put in a lot of effort to fix both of those cars, because
they were both on the grid for the sprint race the next day at 2 p.m. So yeah, definitely. I mean, Lewis was just like, shit, I've given the team so much work, and you could tell he felt really bad just for giving them the work that they have to do, compared to like someone like Latifi who spins out all the time. They must just be used to redoing this chassis every Saturday night. Like, what the hell? Yeah, that was like the craziest thing that happened in quali. Other than that, you had like Verstappen on pole, and then like the Ferraris behind him. It wasn't, I wouldn't say like it was like anything else super crazy happened in quali, but it was a sprint race weekend. So actually, as much as I hate the sprint races, I'm over it. Like I forget that they're gonna happen. I don't care about the race because I don't think it has too much significance, and like I just think it's just such a stupid way to make money. I think they could do so many other things. So I generally don't give a damn about the sprint races, but this weekend it benefited my team because it allowed them to come up in positions, in ranks. So yeah, that's the only reason I was happy about them this weekend, to be honest.
yeah, I still don't care. I'm very much over sprint races, and I don't see the point in them. I don't see why we do them. I watched F3, F2, and F1 sprints on Saturday. And like, I think I get it for the junior formulas. I get it for them. It makes sense because these guys are rookies, right? For F1, it just does not make sense to me. The weird point system, the like quarter distance racing, I don't understand. And apparently, I can't remember, again, the commentators were saying that they're changing the rules of the sprint for F1 next year.
Again?
Yeah. So I'm like, what's the point? I think they are very forgetful events.
Yeah.
They're happening. And generally, like amongst my team, we don't like them. Like my work colleagues were just like not interested in sprints. So I think the general consensus amongst like F1 fans and people is just more people are not fans of it.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things that it is people say like more racing is good, but it's not really racing. It's not long enough to provide the usual things that create an F1 race. You don't get tire setup changes. There's not really enough time to like pull strategies and undercuts and any of that kind of stuff that actually creates a lot of the racing. And until those cars can go wheel to wheel and battle like full out, it's just, and they're getting there. So maybe the sprint races might get a bit more interesting and there might be a bit more like of a shake up. But essentially, it's just like a DRS train of them going round and round in circles for like what people think the boring part of F1 is. To me, that's a sprint race.
maybe it depends on the circuit.
Maybe,
Like
but
maybe,
Austria went it.
yeah, they had one in Silverstone last year, didn't they? When we
Yeah.
went, and we weren't that impressed there either.
And
So
Silverstone's a great circuit. Like, look at the racing we had last weekend. Silverstone is a great circuit, and it was still shit. I really just hated it.
yeah, I'm over the sprints.
Yeah, and like I said, it didn't really shake anything up for the grid. It allowed Russell and Hamilton to move further up. So, Hamilton ended up starting in 8th instead of 10th. Also, Perez ended up having a penalty, so he moved up like one. Everybody below him moved up one position, because this weekend it was just like track limits, track limits, track limits, track limits. That was the thing. So yeah, just dishing them out. Quick side note: do you think track limits were being like overly enforced this weekend?
You know what? Hard to say, because again, I watched all of the racing this weekend. I watched F2 and F3 every single session, and F1. And there were a lot of track limits being exceeded in the junior formulas as well. So I don't know if this is just a track where it's just
Difficult.
over, because it is quite a technical track.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe, I don't know, I can't really remember. This is the worst thing. Like, even though I'm a Formula One fan, I do not remember previous races. Like the way that some of you roll out facts of like races and things that happened like last year or whatever, I do not remember. I do not retain information. So I don't remember what happened in Austria last year.
I know that we had 2 races in Austria last year.
Yeah.
We had the
Was it
Styrian Grand Prix and we had the Austrian Grand Prix. But I too don't remember there being this many track limit violations. But there probably were. I think I'm in two minds. Naomi Schiff said something, which I kind of agree with, which was on a track like this, where you keep calling out track limits, clearly it's a massive issue across the teams. It's not just 1 or 2 infractions. It's like every single team is getting black and white flags like multiple times. So like every single driver, Lewis Hamilton's getting it, Verstappen's getting it, like all of the great drivers are also getting it. So it's not just like the shit drivers, they're all getting it. So in that instance, if nobody's gaining any advantage, is there a point in penalizing it so much to the millimeter? However, my other view, so that's one side, and then my other side is like F1's a technical sport, it is to the millimeter. So if you can't get within that millimeter, are you really that great of a driver? And like you need to be bringing it back onto the track.
harsh.
I know, but that's like my 2 thoughts, and I honestly don't know which one I'm siding with more.
I see your point on both, to be fair.
Exactly.
I don't know. I mean, your first point is a very valid point. Like, if it's across, maybe instead of penalizing everyone, they should just change the track, make it a little bit wider, move the white lines a little bit, and then you wouldn't have as many track limits. I don't know. But yeah,
I mean, yeah, if it's always like the same corner or something like that, just make that corner a millimeter wider. Although maybe then if they still go off, then you know that it's the drivers just taking the piss, isn't it?
you give them an inch and they take a mile.
Literally. But yeah, back to bringing it back round to today. So literally, the sprint race didn't shake up the grid too much, but it allowed some people to move ahead. And as I said, Perez had a penalty, which put him 13th, I want to say, on the grid. So yeah, I think the race itself, I thought was a pretty good race, despite all of the craziness that was happening off track and the expanded weekend because of the sprint race. I think, yeah, it was a good race. Lots of actual racing.
Yeah, there was a lot of racing, which I think is what made it an enjoyable race. There were a lot of midfield battles. There was just a lot going on all throughout. Like, you do get some races where, not gonna lie, and I'm pretty sure all of you feel me on this, you're kind of like watching and then you kind of zone out for like the mid part of the race because you're like, "Oh, it's just not that exciting." And then you come back alive for like the last 10 laps. But this actually had things going on all throughout, like pit stops, strategies, the track limits, lots of midfield battles, lots of people trying to get into their points. It was a lot, and it was very enjoyable. I think one of the main talking points, and probably like the biggest talking point that's come away from this weekend, is Ferrari. And just everything that's going on there. So first of all, let's try and unpack this. First of all, Leclerc had his first race win since
Australia,
and his first like top finish in like the past 5 races or something. So it was kind of nice to see. Well, no, I say kind of nice. It was amazing to see because, you know, big Ferrari fan here. It was amazing to see that like he wasn't shit. Considering how bad his performance has been like the past few races. It's kind of nice to see him back on top and like not really suffering that much with the car. But then that being said, he did have a late throttle issue, which came after his teammate had a DNF because his car caught on fire. So there's a lot going on at Ferrari. So this was during the race. Leclerc was leading, Verstappen second, Sainz third, Sainz hunting down Verstappen on fresher tyres, and it looked like he was, you know, gonna get him, and it looked like Verstappen may take third. And I think we were all so excited for this because it was just like gearing up. We were just like getting closer and closer and closer, and everyone was just like, yes, come on, Carlos. Considering that he obviously won at Silverstone last week, I think everyone was just on a bit of a hype for him. And then out of nowhere, you see him start slowing down, and then they zoom in on his car, and like you see like the explosion, like his engine exploded twice.
Literally.
And it was just really scary actually because you see like a bit of a flame.
Yeah.
And he pulls over to the side,
and the car is like rolling back.
And you're like, stop the car. And he's trying to stop the car, but then in that time the engine explodes again, and the car catches on more fire.
Yeah.
And then it's starting to smoke and blaze up like crazy. And Carlos is still in the car with the car rolling backwards, and you've got a marshal running towards him trying to stop the car like by wedging something underneath the wheel. It was insane.
Honest madness. Like, I think they're very lucky that something worse didn't happen. I know that there's lots of protection on the engines and stuff so that they literally don't explode when they go on fire. But at the same time, like the way that he even did the little explosion, I was like, shit, is that even, you know, is that supposed to happen? Because there was definitely some issues with like the combustion chamber. And I was thinking, fuck, if this car like blows up, like, and he can't get out, I was just thinking of Grosjean again. Like, this was just madness. I know we call Carlos chilly, but like, this is too much hotness. Did not like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was feeling it for him as well because, you know, he's been having like a bit of a tenuous moment with Ferrari, and I think, you know, the more front finishes that he has, and he was running in second, and like, there's a lot going on there, and I think. What do you think about this? You're a Tifosi. So do you think that it's time Ferrari call time on the two of them racing and just put all of their eggs in the Charles Leclerc basket and say, like, let's push for him to be champion by the end of this year?
Such a tough question. Gonna say no.
Okay.
Just because I feel like at the moment, neither of them, just purely performance-wise, not based on their cars, just purely based on just them as drivers. I don't think either of them is outperforming the other. I think they're quite balanced, and I think they're both equally as good.
Yeah.
They've both got what it takes to be a number one, I think.
Yeah.
And I just think that with the relationship and everything that they've got going on, and the fact that they're both young drivers as well, I feel like it would be slightly unfair to call one of them a number one and the other a number two. Especially, like I say, because of the fact that neither of them are really underperforming based on just their talent.
Yeah.
They're both doing really well. So I'm going to say no. I think, yeah, Ferrari just need to continue doing whatever they're doing, and just whoever's having a good race focus on that driver, essentially, which is what they did in Silverstone last week and what they did in Austria this week. So rather than being like, okay, because I think also Leclerc isn't really like, he still could potentially gain on Max in the championship, but he's behind Perez, I think. I don't know if that's changed now, actually. But Verstappen's like really far in the lead on this in the drivers' championship. So I'm a bit like, is there even any point, or do you just kind of let? I don't know. It's hard.
It is hard. I think, you know, like we're at the halfway point of the season, right? Like we've done 12 races, 11 races.
That was 11.
That was 11. So we're nearly at, oh no, we are exactly at the midpoint. So there's only 22 now. There's not 23. So there's only 11 races left. And if Ferrari want to win one of the championships, I don't think they would win. I think if Mercedes have got a handle on their issues that they have, like they've been quite reliable of getting both cars to the end of Grand Prix compared to even like Ferrari, who have had like quite a lot of DNFs depending on the car. So, you know, Mercedes now, if they have a straight run until the end of the year, they could outperform them in the Constructors' Championships. So really, realistically, they kind of need to throw everything behind the Drivers' Championships, and Charles is ahead. But I completely agree with you that I don't think one of them is performing particularly better. Like if you think back to Charles's early races, he was doing really well. Like he got a couple of firsts, he got a second, like a lot of podiums, but then Carlos was having a lot of issues with DNFs. And then more recently, it's kind of been the other way around. So, you know, Charles has had a couple of DNFs in the last few, like he had Baku and he had Spain, like he's had the DNFs, and Carlos has been doing really well. So it's almost like the table has turned a little bit. But I think generally, like Charles, when he is having a good weekend, he performs a little bit better. But is that because he has a little bit more support? Like if Ferrari supported Carlos the exact same way, maybe he would also do a bit better. So I think I agree with you. Like they're too even killed, like they're too even Stevens for you to just choose one off the bat. But I think they're gonna have to choose one, not because I think it's more fair. I just think if they want to win the championship, they're gonna need to be saying to one of the drivers, you need to support the other one.
Yeah, that's a fair point, to be fair. Yeah, I think if you're obviously thinking about the drivers' championship, then yeah, it would make sense for them to back Leclerc. But if they're not, then I don't think it makes sense to appoint a number one and a number two. But yeah, I do really see your point. So I don't know. I suppose we'll see how it kind of plays out over the next few races.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what was nice to see today was, or this race was Leclerc taking it back to Max, and as much as Max was like crying about his tires, I still appreciated like Leclerc overtaking him like 3 times and the little battles that they had. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, definitely. It was just nice to not see Max win at this track. I think it's just that in particular, like him not winning at this track, which meant a lot. It just needs to carry on in Zandvoort, but that's a future problem.
But yeah, elsewhere on the grid, like you said, there were like some pretty good midfield battles. You had like Ocon, Schumacher, Alonso, a whole bunch of them. It was that really cool shot of like 5 cars going in to the corner. That was amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was good.
Yeah, I loved that. That was fun to see. I think Stroll was in that mix as well, and Alonso as well.
Yeah, like
So,
Mick Schumacher,
yeah,
Mike, like there was quite a few of them all in there.
yeah, it was great. Lando
Lando,
and whoever else, I can't remember. But yeah, it was good.
definitely.
Uh,
Nice to see Mick kind of doing well again for a second week in a row. So perhaps last week was not a fluke.
sixth. That was amazing. Like he finished sixth. Like who would expect that from him? In fact, it was pretty impressive the fact that both Haas, both McLaren, and both Alpine drivers finished in the points.
Yeah,
It's quite unusual, but you wouldn't expect that from Haas, especially.
yeah.
So yeah, that was very impressive. But let's just quickly talk about the fact that Hamilton finished third and Russell finished fourth from literally being last after that collision with Perez and then getting a 5 second penalty, then charging back up to fourth.
George
Incredible.
deserves some super flowers this weekend. Um, you know, that collision with Perez, so it was deemed George's fault. So he also not only did he end up at the back, he also had to serve a 5 second grid penalty. 5 second stop and go penalty, sorry.
Did you think that was his fault?
Um, to be honest, I at first when I was watching it, I was like, why is Paris like hooked his tire in there? Because to me that was what made it more Perez's fault at first. But then like kind of watching it back, I I think technically it was Russell's fault, but only because the car couldn't turn in more. Like the car was understeering, and had he been able to turn his car more, it would have been fine. But because he was like, I literally was turning it as much as I could and it wasn't going anywhere. So he was like drifting out. So I think that's kind of what made it more Russell's fault, not necessarily because it was intentionally like him driving badly.
Okay. I see, I haven't watched it back and I haven't seen that, so I didn't know that. But from what I saw, it looked like Perez had enough room on the outside to be able to
Yeah.
avoid that collision. So I did kind of think, is it really George's fault? But it is what it is. He did a great job to come back from serving that penalty and then climbing up back up through the ranks. I think the timing of it worked out quite well because it was like the first lap that it happened. So
Yeah.
obviously after everyone takes their pit stops and whatever, like it just worked out in his favor. Um,
There was actually a lot of pit stops as well this weekend because it was like supposed to be, Pirelli said it was like a one stop race, and some people were on like two, three pit stops. So that really mixed it up as well. And I think that kind of helped with the midfield battles because you had different periods where people were like on different tires and like trying to battle each other and trying to undercut each other. So there was definitely like a lot of good racing and good strategies happening.
yeah, the safety car definitely helped Lewis as well because
Yeah.
obviously with the whole Carlos incident, they needed to get his car off the track, so there was a safety car. And yeah, that kind of played into a lot of people's hands because it was quite later on in the race. So a lot of people were able to take that free pit stop. And yeah, it just helped Hamilton because he ended up coming third.
I know.
Uh, the third race in a row, I think. Something like
Yeah, it was, yeah. And I
yeah,
think again, once again, I was like so close to just, a couple more DNFs or something at the front and could have been right up there with the first.
laps. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's nice to see that Mercedes are making a bit of a comeback, but let's not get our hopes up too much because it's a bit hit and miss, isn't it?
My hopes are up. I want them to win at least. I feel like for me, I just want Hamilton's like his records to be preserved where he has like a race win every single year. So I really want him to at least get one this year.
Yeah, hopefully. Maybe in Brazil.
Yeah. But yeah, elsewhere, like just rounding out the top 10, you had both McLarens, like you said, in there in seventh and ninth. Um, a little bit of an interesting word from Zach Brown. He basically has said that Daniel Ricciardo is still contracted for 2023. It literally just depends on him pulling himself up to Lando's level. So still hope for any Danny Rick fans out there.
Right. That's interesting, but whatever.
You really don't like those guys, do you?
No, I do. I just feel like I'm just not really rating the. I was having this discussion with my cousin yesterday, the girl who got me into F1. And we were talking about Ricardo and just how much of like a massive shame it is, because once upon a time I genuinely thought he was world champion material. I think if he'd maybe stuck it out of Red Bull, like they would have had to give him a chance at some point because he's good. He was the overtake king at one point. Like he was winning races, he was up there on the podium all the time. He's a good driver. He just hasn't had the right car or the right setup behind him, and maybe the right support from the team, because you do tend to have, for example, so obvious, Red Bull, prime example, you do have teams that favor one driver, and McLaren have also obviously, very obviously, picked Lando as their driver. So it's I feel for Danny, to be honest. I do think it must be a massive mental challenge, especially like to go from such a high to such a low without having anything to show for those highs. And then all like the fan base behind you, like I'm one of them as well, I can't deny it, but to have like a lot of people kind of lose faith in you, it must be difficult. So kudos to him for, I think I saw, it actually really broke my heart. I saw a quote from him the other day that was like, I have to keep smiling, otherwise I'll just keep crying, which was like,
that
that's
well.
so sad.
If you kind of look into his state of mind at the moment as well, you can tell that this is like the last grips. Somebody was saying he should just move to IndyCar because Americans love him, and you know he'd probably be great over there. And I think that is a genuine viable option for him after he's finished in Formula One. But I think like he clearly has business left here that he's trying to take care of. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, it would be great to see him back up there battling, but it starts off with things like this, which is coming much closer to his teammate, and both of them kind of being in the points. So hopefully the trend continues, but there's only so many spaces in the points, and you've got like, you know, the Astons who still want it, you've got the Alphas who still want it, you've got you know, for some reason, you know, Bottas, he DNF'd, but Bottas was doing really well as well. Like he's up there, and Zhou has been also performing really well. Gasly hasn't, Yuki hasn't, but you know, sometimes they're on point as well. So there's only so many points finishes, there's only so much space in the top 10. You have to always be consistent, you have to be on top.
Yeah. Anyway, let's finish this video off. Give me your winners or winner and loser of the day.
My winner of the day, no, my loser of the day, I'll do loser first. My loser of the day is gonna have to be Sainz, just because like he was running really high and that was a massive blowout, lost him second. Like that's like a big drop, I think, and a massive knock to his points and everything. So I think he was the biggest loser of the day, but not necessarily through his own fault.
I feel like I want to agree with you. I feel like I don't want to because I love Sainz, but it wasn't his fault, so no, I'm not going to say Sainz. I might give it to Perez because obviously he's another person that you expect to be up there in the points, and unfortunately he ended up having to retire because of that collision and the damage to his car. So my loser of the day is Checo Perez.
I think that's a very fair one, considering the fact that as well, like you feel like he has like good proportion of the blame for the incident. So I think it's a really good one. My winner of the day is going to be Lewis, because you know I always try and give other people ones, but you know when Lewis does well, I like to give him the flowers. And third consecutive points finish. Just waiting for that win. Just waiting for that win. I think that will be super happy. Go and do yours, and then I just want to add something to what I just said, but go on.
Okay. My winner, I'm going to give it to Schumacher, just because I feel like the kid's on fire at the moment. He's got something about him. His defending's really good. He seems to have like reignited his passion for driving. And, you know, he had a really good finish in Silverstone, his first points finish, and then to carry that on, like after like being on such a high, he like to carry that on and like finish sixth. I'm so impressed with him. So he's definitely my winner of the day.
Yeah, I think that's really sweet. I think like you said, him kind of continuing it. It's probably taking some lessons from Uncle Seb actually sitting in like the fact that he's beating Seb in quite a few of the things right now. It's not good for Sebastian Vettel. Boy, anyway, we won't even get into that today. We'll save Aston Martin for another day. Yeah. But in saying that, so in a few weeks, a new technical directive at the Belgian Grand Prix. It was supposed to be at the French Grand Prix coming up in 2 weeks, but actually it's been postponed for a little bit. But a new technical directive will be coming in to combat what F1 are calling flexi floors. So you might have been seeing a little bit about this, you might not understand. I didn't understand. I was just like, what is, like, how can something be illegal and still be allowed to be on the car for that many races? How can it be both at the same time? And essentially what was explained to me is that at this current moment in time, it is not illegal because the test to test whether or not it's illegal doesn't exist yet. It's the same thing with like the flexi wing from last year, where it's just that the test that they do is a static test when the car's still, and basically the floor underneath, there's like a board. I don't know if many of you have seen it, but if you go have a look at a Formula One car, there's a board that sits underneath, and it's screwed in by titanium kind of circle bits to screw it in, and that can only be at a certain deflection, which is 2 mil. And apparently they suspect that some of the cars, such as Ferrari and Red Bull, are flexing by up to 6 mil at the moment. But because that only happens when the car is in motion during the race, they haven't been able to test this factor. And the only way they can test this factor is going to come in Belgium. But what that means is that these teams have so many weeks to figure out a solution. So if they have been gaining an advantage from flexi floors, we will never know, because I'm sure most of the teams will have it all sorted by Belgium. What the potential could happen there is if they have been benefiting from these flexi floors, which is allowing them downforce when they need it and better aero when they also need that. So it does the opposite of whatever they need at the time. They might lose some performance, probably not a lot. You're looking at maybe like 0.3 of a second, but where you've got, for example, the Mercedes, who are, you know, 5/10, half a second off the pace, that will be making a very big difference to them. So I'm kind of interested to see, and like I said, I come back to that point, Hamilton possibly could be in for a few wins if the Ferraris and the Red Bulls performance is hampered by this new test that's coming through. So I will be watching and seeing what happens there.
It'll be interesting to see if we can tell.
We'll just see slower lap times, right? Or like the gap between them will be less.
There you go. You learn something new every day. Okay, I guess we'll keep an eye out for that. Yeah, the next Grand Prix is bloody Paul Ricard next weekend.
You said that so British.
Paul Ricard. Le Castellet. Yeah, I feel like no one cares about Paul Ricard, so I don't really have much to say about it.
No. But we will be here to talk about the race that nobody cares about, don't worry.
Yeah, I mean, we're racing there with a new generation of cars, right? The racing is supposed to be closer, so maybe it will be an exciting race for what God knows what reason. We can always hope. So yeah, we'll be back after the French Grand Prix next week. In the meantime, please remember to share, like, comment, subscribe, tell your friends to tell your friends, come and tell us your thoughts on this race, and yeah, just share your thoughts with us because we like to hear from you. And we'll catch you next time, I suppose.
See you next time. Bye.
Ciao.